Greetings, YouTube. I was looking at a list of Substack questions dealing with fantasy games, and specifically a lot of them touch on D&D and Pathfinder, the classic high fantasy games of the modern era. Um, and one of the people asked, should one of their friends be so concerned about their character carrying alchemical fire? The player is absolutely terrified of their character carrying a vial of alchemical fire on them while adventuring. Now, I mean, there are ways to mitigate that. For example, I can remember back in the day when potions were used in our group that when we had one character that had a little metal box. It was a case, and that it would hold, I think it held like 6 potions, and that allowed them to be held closed up so that essentially you could take a tumble and it wouldn't affect him in the least. But by and large, it didn't seem to be something that came up all that often. I mean, most of us carried potions on us, and we didn't make any kind of mitigating efforts. We just said we were carrying potions on us. It's much the way that very rarely did we ever concern ourselves with the durability of our weapons or armor or our magic items, unless it became some kind of a plot point, like if you were facing a rust monster, for example. But I guess it really does kind of make sense if you're going to have some kind of, uh, connection with reality, your gear should have some kind of inter, interaction with the world around it. I'm not necessarily going so far as to say you have to have like the durability mechanics you see in a lot of games where like your weapons are wearing down with each hit and you have to make sure they get, constantly repaired because the game uses artificial scarcity and crafting as a means of slowing down character progression. Um, Now, but there are times when the things that you carry on your person can be damaged. I myself have experienced that because I've fallen before. I was carrying a laptop one day and I instinctively prevented the laptop from being injured, but in the process injured myself and my clothing. I put a big hole in a shirt and I put a hole in a pair of pants. Uh, and it was there was just that was my at that in that moment my choice was save the laptop, so I did. My wife said it was pretty funny because I tripped. I think it was a trip. She said, and I was going to the passenger door. She was driving, and she said, I looked over and all I saw was your feet in the air, which in retrospect is funny, but at the moment it wasn't. I was bleeding and I was unhappy, but my laptop was fine. But that kind of thing can happen in ordinary life, let alone if you're out there, doing the rough and tumble things of being an adventure, which is essentially very much like being a member of a special forces unit. You're out there on the sharp end of things doing stuff that most people will never even, encounter, never fantasize about doing. You are doing the really dangerous stuff. And if you think about it, military grade equipment is called that because it needs to be military grade. It needs to be able to survive a degree of, you know, hard use that most of us are never going to have to encounter. I mean, if you're just carrying an ordinary pocket knife, this pocket knife is going to survive a fair amount of abuse, but it's not going to be bulletproof. You can fall and hurt this, potentially damage it, and potentially damage yourself if you do it in a really unlucky manner. But a fixed blade knife in the right kind of sheath is going to stay exactly where it's supposed to stay. It isn't going to harm you, or it's not going to get overly damaged. The handle may get, jacked up a little, but it isn't going to mean that the thing isn't going to function. Um, but I guess we just never thought about potions because potions are a special consideration. And many alchemical substances come in potion bottles. They're throwables, like a Tanglefoot bag, for example. That's a throwable. If for it to function, it has to fail. Its container has to fail on the point of impact, which means its fit container can fail on a point of impact if you're wearing it and you impact something. Because for it to function the way it's supposed to, it can also inadvertently function while it's on your person. The same thing with a chemical fire, uh, or there's also a freezing version of that too. I can't remember what it's called. Maybe probably called a chemical frost or something. Um, but you get the point. Same with poisons. If you're not carrying poisons in like one of those little maces, little metal cases I described, you could definitely put yourself at risk. And I know that there's a feat says that you don't put yourself, at risk while handling poisons, but that is to me talking about the preparation and the transportation of them to a container. So you're preparing a poison, you put the poison into a container or onto a blade or something, and all of that is concerned, you are safe because you have the right kind of training. But if you have a vial of poison on yourself and you have not prepared a container that is going to make it, you know, military grade, there's no reason that you could not break that and have that poison then be seeping into your clothing. And even if a poison isn't a contact poison, I'm telling you, you don't want poison in a soaking into your clothing against your skin. That's bad. Um, but we never seem to take advantage of that. And I don't know if the group that this guy's playing with has a GM that really Nick is a real stickler for that kind of thing. They're a real pedant, or whether they're more average like most of us, so we just don't think about it. But it really does, to me, seem like a missed opportunity for a GM. I mean, I don't want to kill someone outright, but it'd be pretty darn funny if somebody's carrying a Tanglefoot bag and their character fails a jump check or a climbing check, and they take, a climbing check and they take a 20-foot drop until the rope they're on catches them, and they smack the face of the rock face that they're climbing, and you roll for it, and the guy he fails some roll, or your roll is particularly good for that failure, and suddenly you've got a guy who's got a tanglefoot bag goes off, and now he's glued to the side of a cliff. That's kind of funny, and it could be really dangerous under certain circumstances. Um, but of course, it'd be easy for a GM to abuse that as well. And there also isn't any reason that someone couldn't target a person who actually has uh, they know that person is carrying potions. If you know where they carry their potions, and you could tell, say, I'm targeting that part of their body with the intention of triggering something, that could be a tactic. I can remember there was a spaghetti western I watched many years ago, and I think Henry Ford might have been in it, and it was the group was known for carrying explosives, and the guy watched the person carrying the explosives put it into a saddlebag which was covered in silver buckles, and that later in the movie he could see the light in the distance reflecting off that silver buckle. He could see the guy at the horse, and it was a long shot, but he took it, and he was able to shoot the explosive, which was dynamite, and dynamite in the 19th century wasn't the most stable thing in the universe, and it goes off and blows up, and of course that starts the battle. Um, but it was a great opening salvo, because it was the 19th century equivalent of shooting somebody with a shoulder-mounted rocket, from a distance. But there isn't anything stopping a person from saying, making a perception check, or this person is famous for carrying potions inside of a vest or a coat or something, and they pull them out, or a poison or something, saying I'm intentionally targeting the part of their body with the desire to break the container that they have on their person. And I think that should be a viable tactic. I'm not saying it would be an easily viable tactic, it would be difficult to do, but I'm saying it wouldn't necessarily be when something completely out of bounds. Let's face it, we've all done incredibly bizarre and strange things in games and pulled them off because we just got lucky with the dice, um, and you had very favorable conditions under certain circumstances. So yeah, should you be afraid of carrying alchemical file is a legitimate question. It really is. Because there are times when, if you trip and fall, you may set yourself on fire. And chemical fire is dangerous. There's a reason that it's a weapon. So yeah, that's a good question if you ask me. It's a completely reasonable question. And I think there should be concern, but I think it's really situational. Does your GM pay attention to those kind of details a lot? Or would they only pay attention in extreme circumstances, like somebody is loading their body down with vials of, alchemical then maybe that you want to take into consideration that you might want to package those properly. Because if the GM sees an opportunity like that, they may take it, even if it isn't something they would do if you were carrying like 1 or 2 vials. Um, so yeah, tell me, have you ever concerned yourself over these kind of things? Have you ever experienced a GM that was very detail oriented and made sure that that was taken something they took into consideration, in every single battle? I'd be interested in knowing.